Oh, I see. Interesting. How's it going? I always feel like the starts of lives are pretty awkward because, I don't know, there's only like three of you, right? Like I can talk to each of you like individually, but you're kind of forced to talk like you're in a big group. Um, but yeah, hello. Thank you for joining. I'm waiting on a friend of mine to join who's going to be the second person up here. I didn't go to Bootcamp for CS, but my friend did. And so get a lot of questions about people who are considering Bootcamp or considering getting into tech like on their own by like learning on their own. And yeah, like I'm not the best equipped to answer those questions. So a friend of mine is going to be joining. He went to a bootcamp in Canada, which is pretty cool, and like later graduated and is now working at a startup, which is nice. And yeah, he's just better equipped to answer questions that I can't answer. So we're waiting on him to join, but until then, chill out in the lobby, and yeah. Yeah, go Mooney. I'm glad I could host it too. I'm planning on learning a lot too, because like, I don't know, I've always heard of boot camps and how they're like useful as an introduction to the industry, but I have never like done or gone to a boot camp before. So yeah, it's like new to me as well. It did just start, Abhinav, so we're still waiting on like the guests to join. But for now, it's just me, which I hope isn't a bad thing. But yeah, it just started. I think TikTok also records the whole thing, so I don't know how I'm going to share it yet, but I'm planning on sharing at least parts of it, or at least like what I learned. Another fun fact, I'm also on call during this live, which is fun. And there's like an issue going on right now that I might be like answering later on. Like that is one of them. So I might just be like typing away while Dawn, who's going to be joining, is answering questions. So I'm going to try to be like more of a participant than an answer today, like answering your question. Like I'm always happy to, but yeah, I'm going to let Dawn do the majority of question answer. Yeah, that's my main critique with boot camps as they stand right now, which is they are good to teach you things in one way, and if like you want to learn how to do something another way, or you're confronted with a problem that's very different than how you've done it before, then you're kind of lost. And I think in university you're kind of forced to deal with that. And yeah, like you're kind of forced to deal with the unknown, and that helps when you go to university or when you go through that formal education system. They will be recorded and posted, I think. I work for Plaid. I'm going to answer a question because, like I mentioned before, I'm on call and I have to answer some questions. Sweet. Hello. The 5-year outlook, like in terms of like how the company is doing, I think the company is doing great. But I'm kind of biased, right? Like I work there. Okay, so it's two. I graduated from UC Riverside. School didn't help me much. Like there were some opportunities, but not like that many, right? It's like UC Riverside isn't very well known to be like a computer science school. Yeah. Let's see. Sorry. Yes, Plaid, the financial service company. I'm not single. Sorry. I guess. Let's see. Going to community college, I think, is a great alternative to like starting in the 4-year education system right away. I think like with community college, like especially if like you have financial concerns about like how that works, then like for you, then yeah, definitely take CS and get your intro courses taken care of. But you will have to like maybe do some side projects and such to do that. to be at the same level as like what people who are in full stack or like who are doing the 4-year thing are doing. I work as a full stack engineer. Let's see. Tips for women wanting to switch careers and get into tech. Yeah, I am very clearly not a woman. I don't identify as a woman. So my tips, like what I think the best thing for anyone in CS, and especially those who are coming into CS from underrepresented minorities, is to join groups where you can find like-minded people. And so at a lot of universities on campus, there's SWE, which is, I forget the acronym, but SWE, and the Society of Women Engineers. That's like a good club to join. Some universities will also have women in computing, which is a really good club to join as well. And that's something that our campus like started off. Those are both really good. I don't work in Kotlin. Sorry, I don't really have much thoughts on it, or many thoughts on it. I think the only thing that matters in terms of like which university you go to is like the opportunities that that campus gets. So, for example, like an MIT will have a lot more companies recruiting on campus than a much smaller college. But as long as you're taking advantage of the universities that, or of the companies that are recruiting on campus, then like you'll be fine. Just understand that you have less opportunities, and that means that you will have to take advantage of them like more fully. Let's see. Is it easy to freelance? I freelanced throughout college, actually. So, yeah, I was a freelancer. I did contracts for like small startup companies, and that kind of like paid my way throughout college. So yeah, I didn't really like have any debt when I graduated, even though I was like paying for it on my own. No, I don't need a boyfriend. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I actually don't study outside of work. I think it's a good question. I prefer to like keep my work and my life like pretty separate. Except like right now I'm on call and like I kind of have to like pay attention to this. But other than that, I'm usually like pretty separate in terms of like at 5 o'clock like I'm done working, and I like have my own life and stuff. I don't really study. And I've graduated, so I'm not studying for school or anything. Let's see. Okay, cool. Yeah, sweet. 1 second. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Let's go ahead. Yeah, if I missed your questions, please go ahead and like just retype them. Yeah, I'm feeling good after the surgery. Thank you. Yeah, I have like two different parts of my audience. Like one that is here from thyroid surgery, and one that's like in tech, right? But yeah, I'm doing well, which is good. Whether or not you want to buy Plaid stock is up to you and if it goes public. That's not like I can't give that financial advice. Oh, hey Don. Don, you need to go ahead and like do the guest request, and I can get you in. And we can start answering questions. There are a lot of questions, so yeah, excited to answer them. I definitely can't say when and if they'll go public. Should I go all into software engineering if I believe the metaverse will really be Web 3.0? Like Web 3.0 is like still software engineering, right? You still need to code. So yeah, I think you still should have like a good understanding of like which like how to program, right? Like just how to think in that way. And so like that's still pretty important. Sweet. 3, 2, 1.
Hey.
Let me connect my headphones so that they don't hear like echo.
Sure. How's everyone doing?
Don, do you want to give like an intro yourself so people know who you are, why you're here, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I'm also let me just preface this. I'm on call right now, and there's like some alerts firing, so I might be answering those or like typing away.
Uh,
Yeah, sorry. I wish I could give like my full attention to this today, but yeah, it's
yeah, no
unfortunate.
worries. Let me know if you have to duck out and tend to some fires. But I'm Shashik. I'm also known as Don Restaurant. That's my internet handles all over the internet. So um, yeah, I'm a software engineer. I work as a senior software engineer at Copper, and I run my own company, Restaurant. So yeah, it's that's just like a little bit of what I do. But outside of that, I love making content and helping people get into tech. I do mentoring with a couple of boot camps here in Toronto. So yeah, bring a little bit of that to TikTok. And my audience, as far as I know, is mainly in tech. So yeah, it's just a lot of making a lot of videos on like conversational videos on how you can get into tech from a non-technical background and things like that. So yeah, that's a bit about me. It's interesting that I actually don't even know how to pronounce your name. So I guess let's start with that. We've talked before, but yeah, I don't think we've really talked like at a personal level. So I'm looking forward to getting started on that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, do you want to, I guess like you kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like origin stories, right? So like tell me about
Mm.
like what you did like prior to tech and like what made you move over.
Yeah, I think so. Before tech, I was really a student, and outside of that, I was just working at KFC. So that's as far as my like working experience before tech. So yeah, I would say tech was my like first real job, and
Mhm.
even then, like the very first company I got started with was an early stage startup led by a famous Canadian angel investor named Sanjay Singhal. So starting there, and after that, I went to Sustainalytics, which is like a financial services company. We got acquired by Morningstar, so I joined them, and yeah, now I'm at Copper. So that's sort of been my journey so far. What about you? I want to know how you ended up in tech.
Yeah, so I kind of followed like the pretty standard like introduction into it. I was actually like pretty lucky that my high school had some CS classes, a little bit more than just like APCS. Uh, sorry, hold on. That went a little bit further than APCS. So we had like 3 years of CS offered. I took all 3 years. I had like experimented with a bunch of other classes that we had as well.
Hmm.
And yeah, I tried CS. I really enjoyed it. I did that for 3 years. In the middle of those 3 years, I had like an internship at a consulting firm. Yeah, with Mr. Yi. Okay, so someone from here is like from my high school, which is interesting. But yeah, so I had an internship in high school, and I learned a lot of web dev there, not knowing any before. Came back to school, and I was telling our teacher that like, oh, this is really something that we should teach because it's like really cool and a little more real world than like the APCS Java stuff that we learn in school right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so I like wrote this course with him, and it eventually got taught, and it's been taught I think for like 5 years now, um, mostly unchanged, which is good because my goal with this was to make it as like fundamental as possible. So like technologies don't necessarily change the um, like the actual course load or the curriculum. And so, yeah, web programming was lit, as you can see. Someone clearly liked it. And yeah, after that, I went to college, continued CS, um, had an internship my freshman year. I interviewed at Facebook, but I didn't get the offer. Um, so because I hadn't even taken data structures yet, so it was kind of obvious that I wasn't going to pass.
Hmm.
But it was a good experience. Came back the next year, got the internship, converted that to a full-time offer, worked at Facebook for a year and a half on like a very core infra team in the storage org. Decided I didn't want to work that low level, and now I work at Plaid, which is a fintech, on the developer experience team, which is like full stack web. But we're also like we sit very close to the customer.
Cool. Cool. That's
That's like
actually
the
a
full
ton to
story.
pack.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's like a ton to unpack there. So yeah, getting into like, so you have a traditional background into tech, which
Mhm.
is great. Um, and then from there, you worked at Fang, and then now you're at Plaid, which is like as far as I know, I can connect like my bank accounts to a different service through Plaid, like Wave accounting, or like, it's like a bank like connector sort of thing.
Yeah.
As far as I know. So
Mhm.
cool. That's really cool. So I'm wondering, when you started out um, at Facebook, like what was it like? Just the workload.
Yeah, totally. So when you start at Facebook as an unallocated engineer, which is what most new grads are, you
Hmm.
are joining basically to do 12 weeks of boot camp, which means that um, for 12 weeks, you kind of just like learn the technologies that are used at this company. And
Hmm.
then they allow you to do like small tasks per team. And then for each team, you kind of decide like, do you like them? Do you not like them? And if you do, then you do like more intense tasks for them. Um, and then at a certain point, you and the manager have a talk and decide like, okay, this is the team that I want to join. Uh, and I did that. Eventually, I was deciding between two teams. One, which was very much in my like core skill set of web development, and one which was very new to me, which was this like core low level infra. Um, yeah, joining Facebook was the first time I didn't have to work to pay the bills, or like pay college debt, and
Yeah.
so I was like having the freedom of choice. I chose something that was new, um,
Nice.
and to me that was this like core infra stuff. And
Okay.
so yeah, it was a good experience, but I don't think I wanted to live like that isolated from the customer experience of Facebook, right? Or any
That's
like
okay.
Instagram or WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Like, I don't know how low level like you were, but I do a lot of, so I'm the architect at my company. So
Mm-hmm.
we offer services for startups to build web software. So I really enjoy doing that infrastructure stuff, at least the way I do it, on
Mm-hmm.
AWS. Yeah, tell me more about like the low levelness. Like how low was it?
Yeah, so all of Facebook stuff is on-prem, so or on-premise, meaning we don't
Hmm.
abstract through AWS or anything like that.
Hmm.
Which means to us, low level is bare machine, like X, like
Oh
hey,
wow.
this was yeah, like this machine was spun up, wasn't spun up properly, the services weren't migrated to like SSH in, migrate the services manually. That kind of like ops work is pretty common, especially when you're on call on that team. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, like it's just very low level, right? Like I just don't want to do
Yeah.
that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so wow, that can get pretty hairy there. Like when you're
yeah,
talking about that, because like yeah, you're right. AWS is like a huge layer of abstraction. Even though like compared to something like Heroku, like AWS might be low level because you're like managing instances and things like that.
mhm.
But um, yeah, I guess ask me a question. I'm out of questions for some reason. I'm just blanking out.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I think a lot of the people who are here in this stream, right? And okay, maybe there's
Hmm.
not that many, but to me, I always think of like um, the first time I ever talked to a crowd was in a classroom, right? And so 34
Okay.
people in the lab. Now that is a classroom of people, and so to me, like that's a lot of people. A lot of people here have questions about maybe potentially being outside of tech originally and going into tech. So like what
Hmm.
was your thought process of like why tech and maybe like which boot camp you picked? Um
Okay.
yeah, like that whole like thinking process of like, like I'm done, for example, like working at KFC, and I want to be like a software engineer.
Right. Yeah. So I guess long story short, I was working at KFC for about 3 months. I wasn't happy with it at all. And
Mm-hmm.
before that, I studied business in university, which the way I did it was totally unproductive because it was a BA. So it didn't have the technical side of business. Like it did have a little bit of math and, economics and stats and things like that. But outside of that, it wasn't technical at all. So when I graduated, I didn't have any like marketable skills, right? I could, I guess, research and write an essay, but besides that, besides arguing a point, I couldn't really do much. So yeah, worked at KFC for 3 months. I was a manager there. So yeah, it was that experience taught me um, the more technical skills you have, the better chance you can have at either having like financial stability by like by having a job like in Fang or whatever, um, or you can use those skills and start your own business. Hopefully, you can figure out a way to find people who are just as good as you or even better, and start a business that way. But yeah, just like in the moment, like in 2018, when I had that, like, just do I want to get into tech? That idea actually was in my head all my life because, I'm not sure how old you are, but I was born in 1995. So
Okay,
it
you're not that old,
was
or not that much older.
okay. But I remember, so I grew up in the third world, which is in my head, it's like 10 years behind the first world.
Mhm.
So in 1995, when I was born, like we were just getting dial-up internet. So like all the 90s like nostalgia I still have, even though I was born at the tail end of the 90s. So
Mhm.
um anyway, tangent aside, I was always into like computers and like electronics as a kid. And
Mhm.
I remember, um, yeah, just like that the love for, um, I'm also into watches, so like the love for mechanical and electronic things just came up, and I'm like, hey, software seems like a nice and neat way of exercising that passion. The passion to like figure out how things work, build things.
Mhm.
At the time, like building wasn't really, in the picture. Like I just wanted to get a job. So
Mhm.
so yeah, I went to a boot camp, and the boot camp experience actually, I
Oh,
I
sorry,
already had
there's
a
a
template.
question in the chat. Which boot camp did you go to?
I went to GA, General Assembly. At the
Okay,
time, it
okay.
was called Bitmaker, so it's in
Mhm.
Toronto here. So the idea to go to a boot camp, actually, I didn't come up with it on my own. Like I already had a template. Like one of my friends went to the same boot camp, and he
Mhm.
ended up getting a job just like a month after graduation. So like growing up together, like in going to high school and stuff, we had common interests.
Mhm.
So I figured that, hey, like this could work, but also at the
Mhm.
same time there was a lot of doubt like around me because I come from a very like traditional family. So
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mom's like, you got to go to law school, you got to be like me. My dad's like, no, you got to go to med school, you got to be like me.
Right,
So
right.
it's it's just one of those things where as kids, like you think that that's what you want to aspire to be, but then you try to do it and it's like I'm not even having fun. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah, boot camp was super fun for me, and
Nice.
yeah, I don't know how it was with like CS, right?
Mhm.
Was there like a lot of hands-on learning and like building projects and things like that when you when
So
you went
definitely
through?
not. It's the opposite of the boot camp experience, I feel. So,
Okay.
um, yes, in college, you like take courses, right? And like it's like your first year intro to CS. You'll take data structures and algorithms. You might do like I don't know, man. And then you get into the upper level courses, and then you just do like operating systems or networks and that kind of stuff. And you're just learning
Hmm.
like the theory of how like networking works, for example, right? Or
Hmm.
the theory of like how operating systems schedule work to be done on a processor, which is like
Hmm.
extremely low level. But I think what helps
Hmm.
there is that you approach these problems from a like systems perspective, which I don't
Hmm.
think you do necessarily when you like go into a boot camp. But I think what a boot camp teaches is the problem solution, like practical way of finding a solution to a problem, which doesn't always have to be like the ideal theoretical, like answer. Um, yeah, there are some questions here that I think we should like go back and answer.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do that. Why don't you get started on it?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's
cool. So
it's
I
interesting.
don't
You
know. Go ahead.
sorry, just want to say something really quickly. So it's interesting you mentioned that yeah they give you just the right tool set to get started. Yeah, they teach you how to learn. So I
Hmm.
realized that going through university, you're taught a lot of theoretical things, but not how to apply them. So you don't really exercise that part of your brain, like your like analytical and creative side. So
Hmm.
with bootcamp, it's like they teach you the theoretical stuff in the morning, and then in the evening, at 1 o'clock and onwards, 1 to 5, you apply it to a project and you build it, you deploy it, whatever. So yeah, let's get to questions. Just want to get that
Oh,
off
good
my
critique.
chest.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone, no need to like answer questions like or ask questions twice. I'm just gonna go to the top of like what I haven't read and move down. Um, yeah. So I guess like one thing was, yeah. Okay. Wait. You answer that question. Okay. Yeah. So someone asked like what startup you work at.
Oh, I work at Copper CRM, which is it's a Series C Google Ventures backed startup that builds on top of Google Workspace. So
Mhm.
it brings a CRM to Gmail and to Google Docs.
Nice.
Also
Very cool.
LinkedIn as well, I think. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Nice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, one Syrian, how are you doing?
Yeah. I saw I joined as well. Hello. Cool. I think another question here was how do you negotiate like offers? So yeah, I'm curious if you like had a situation where you had like multiple offers and like how that went for you. I have my own stories as well, but yeah, I'll let you answer first.
Cool. Thank you. So I think the very first time I had multiple offers was actually when I first became a dev. So when I finished up boot camp, I was given an offer by this company, another startup called Quick Report Systems. They were building IR IR labels you could put on properties for organizing like maintenance and things like that. So yeah, I got an offer from them and also an offer from Sanjay Singhal, the angel investor I worked for 2 years at his startup Fortspace. So yeah, it was essentially the offers were almost identical, except for the fact that in the latter case, sorry, in the former case with quick report systems, it was like a 6 month or 1 year recurring contract or something to that effect. It wasn't like full time, but the compensation was the same. So yeah, honestly, at that point in my life, I was happy I was given even a single offer. So
Hmm.
yeah, I just went with the full time role. I actually didn't know that working at Ford Space was going to be like the best decision in terms of just like raw skills and acquiring skills I've made. So yeah, it's been that job has taught me a bunch. Just working at a startup for 2 years, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think yeah, like I've also been working for about 2 years. So I think in terms of like work experience in total, we have about the same um, here. Sweet. So someone asked like, how much did the boot camp cost, and like, do you feel it was worth it? I think like this person's a new grad in 2022, so like, I mean, I don't know that I
Mm-hmm.
would recommend going to a boot camp if you're already in like CS, in at a
That's
university.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was one person in my cohort who had a CS degree,
Hmm.
and yeah, they still went to boot camp. But to answer the first question of how much it cost, it was 12 and a half grand plus tax. In Ontario, we have a 13% sales tax, so yeah, that was how much it cost. And outside of that, if you really want to see the value in it, you got to zoom out over a period of like 2 years. So when I started my career, obviously I didn't go into the like this, the top end of the market, right? So I was in fact considering salaries here in Canada. I was paid below market for my first job, and then every year since then, I've like doubled my salary. So getting to that six figures in under 2 years, you can easily get to six figures if you work hard and you work at a place where they let you grow. And yeah, I was leading a team about 10 months into my career. And yeah, at Fortspace, I led yeah, a team of a developer and another designer. So yeah, it was pretty good if you work for a place that recognizes excellence, you know. But outside of that, going into Fang, that's you're guaranteed six figures.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so yeah, I think like let's see, we're talking about negotiation. So I've always been uh, lucky enough, I guess, to be in a place where I've had multiple offers. And
Hmm.
so for me, at least, the negotiation aspect is just like leverage of one offer onto the other to see if like there's matching allowed or like if the company will, and they mostly do. In my last job search, I was like working at Facebook and I was moving to Plaid, and that was like almost easier leverage because like my answer to them like it was like if you hit me with like this offer, then I'll join. Otherwise, like I'm perfectly
Hmm.
happy where I am. Like I make good money. Like
Yeah.
work is fine. Um, and yeah, like it's really good, I guess, to be in a place where you can just have the privilege to just like deny offers that you get. Um,
Yep.
but that's where I
Agreed.
was. So I stayed at Facebook for about a year and a half before I moved over. Someone asked.
Yeah. That was pretty much the same thing for me. I worked for Morningstar slash Systenalytics for a year. And then, yeah, as you said, so I mean, you were going from a huge tech company to what is essentially like now a mature startup, right? I'm not sure how old
Yeah, it
Plaid
was
is,
Series D.
but I'm
So
sure. Series what?
Series
Oh,
D.
was it Series D? Okay.
I
Yeah.
joined. I joined at
So
C, and then they announced their Series D funding like a week after I joined, which was very good for me.
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah. Um, but I think once you get your foot in the door, as you mentioned, getting those offers and bouncing them off of each other is it's part of the game, I think. And as a software engineer, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
I feel like most people, if you're looking to maximize your salary, you should be interviewing with companies at least once every 6 months.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah, because in my experience, I don't apply that often to companies, but when I do apply, I do get offers. So it's not always like exactly what I want, but once you have that momentum and that practice,
Mhm.
it's pretty good. Especially just staying on top of the trends, right? Like right now in mature startups, and I want to actually get into a topic on this. Were you given so your technical challenge for the
Mhm.
for the job at Plaid? Were you
Mhm.
given an algorithms or project based one?
No, so it wasn't it wasn't a project that I would work on like my
Okay.
own time, but the question
Okay.
itself was very like real world esque. Like you wouldn't see it on LeetCode. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Did you
if that
code
makes sense.
though? You
It
wrote
was
code?
coding. Yeah, it was still coding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it
So there
like
was
brain
a
teaser code or something like that?
no. So
Or like what was
it
it?
was like write a function that does X and like we'll test it at the end and that kind of stuff. So there was one coding screen like that.
Oh, okay.
The on-site had like two coding questions, a system design question, and like a question with like the hiring manager.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I've had so many different interviews I've been subjected to, and
Hmm.
I think so for Fort Space, there was no technical challenge. It was like, hey, I met with Sanjay, I met with his business partner. It was very much so a behavioral challenge.
Hmm.
The challenge was go find 10 words, write a story with it, and yeah, at the end he showed me like a CRM and had me answer a few questions about data and things like that, like Excel, and
Hmm.
yeah, that was it. So I was I don't know. I feel like for most people that is not the typical case. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely the case at smaller companies. I'll say like the internship I had freshman year of college was
Hmm.
actually interesting because I was like interviewing with them, and then I recognized the name from somewhere, and so I
Hmm.
looked to see why I recognized them, and it turns out that the consulting firm that I interned at in high school had actually like basically written like all the code for this startup that I was interviewing with,
Hmm.
and so my interview was literally like, you know that consulting company you hired to write all your code? I used to work there. So I already know how everything like you have works. And they were like,
Nice.
sweet. So you want to start in June? And I was like, yeah, sounds good to me. Um, it, it yeah, it's a very rare case, but like that's what happened. Uh,
Yeah.
someone was
Give
asking
me
about,
Sorry,
oh,
give
go
me
ahead. Yeah,
1 second. I gotta silence an alarm.
sure, sure, sure. So I'm going to answer this question, I think, because I can answer it. System design questions,
I've
like
been
when you should expect
I've
them.
been dodging.
Oh, dodging what?
Are we back? Are we? Oh, I was saying I was dodging the Pomodoro during this call. It was
Oh, I
going
see. I
off.
see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
For
and
sure.
iPhones don't have a good way of dismissing it. When it's like
Mhm.
when you're doing something else and the notification comes up, you keep just snoozing it. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I use a Pomodoro app on my computer, but not on
Okay.
my phone. Yeah. Someone was asking like when you should start expecting system design questions. I think you'll be asked them at a FANG, right? Like that's where my experience is. You'll be asked them at every level of
Hmm.
interviewing, like whether you're new grad, mid-level, senior. But the importance of the system design question will be different depending on the level. So essentially, like if you're a new grad, they'll ask you the system design question just to see if you can like roughly make cohesive thoughts. If you're a mid-level engineer, you should be building like somewhat of a useful design, like something that works. And if you're a senior, like that's when um, the system design interview is actually like pass or fail, and you can get like declined based off your performance on the system design interview. But for SD1 and SD2, not doing well on the system design is okay and doesn't block a hire. And then that's at least how it works at Plaid. Like I've been on a couple calibration committees by now. So
Yeah. Like in my experience, I wasn't asked, as I said, so I wasn't asked systems design questions until my current job. So I'm a senior software engineer here, and for their interview, it was, yeah, they asked about things. They asked things focused on databases because that's where some of the bottlenecks are at our company. So
mhm.
they were asking for, sharding, right? Horizontal, vertical. So things like that. But outside of that, they had already seen a system I had built. So I built this open source WordPress alternative for Ruby developers called
Mhm.
Violet Rails.
Mhm.
So they had seen a few of those systems that were deployed, the ones that, I've deployed for clients, and they've seen the source code. So that's on GitHub. Um, so from that perspective, they didn't really probe me all that much on system
Mhm.
design because they already knew I was AWS certified, and I
Mhm.
had
Yeah, yeah.
done
And that kind of
DevOps. Yeah,
certifications can definitely help, especially at smaller
yeah,
companies where they're like, we're not going to waste time interviewing you with this, because like
yeah.
there's more value like trade off there.
Yeah, but also at the same time, even though I did have that certification, we do have
Hmm.
an internal process that we enforce on every new engineer who joins. Like we have a on-call training. We have DevOps training, operator training, so you know how to connect to Kubernetes safely and mess up the context.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
for
know.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you follow Help Me Exit by.
Yeah,
She's
yeah, yeah,
hilarious. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So she does a lot of Kubernetes content, but yeah, I deal with that on a daily basis. At the day job,
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I'm a huge Kubernetes fan, but that's a tangent for a different day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see, there's some questions here. Someone asked, yeah, like, is Python a good language to learn first, or another language if they're going to eventually major in CS? So I think Beck is in high school. I think it's definitely one of the most versatile languages you can learn. And if the goal is like to start building things and to have something tangible in front of you, then yeah, like Python's a great language to start learning. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
on
To
a
give an
second note, oh yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
to give like an alternate perspective, for me, there's like top three. I think
Hmm.
number one for me personally, Ruby, beautiful syntax, really easy to read. Number
Hmm.
two is JavaScript, just because you can jump into your console in your browser and get started, right? You can jump into a code pen, get started. So the barrier to entry is very low with JavaScript, and you can do full stack JavaScript. It's
Yeah,
just versatile, right?
yeah,
And then from there, yeah, I would say the third place is dealer's choice. So I guess Python,
yeah.
you know.
Dealerships.
I've used yeah, like I've used very little Python,
Hmm.
mainly for what is it, computer vision projects.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've never used Python personally. I think like I just tell people like if usually if anyone asks me like should I learn this language to start, I just
Mhm.
usually say yes, because there's not really any bad language
Yeah,
choices. The idea is
exactly.
like a lot of people will spend time. deciding between like, should I learn like X language or Y language, right? Like which one will be
Mhm.
better for me? And they'll
Mhm.
think about that, for example, for like a month. Uh, and then like what I think is like, look, if you had just picked one, right, like a month ago, you already would have learned something. And like if you decide 1 month later, you're like, oh no, I fucking hate Python. I like semicolons, right? And then you can like switch over to something else. Like the
Exactly.
concepts will still stay with you. But I think
Exactly.
the biggest thing you need to do is just like pick a language and like go.
Yeah, just do it. Just Nike it, That's it. That's all you got to do in that case. Actually, this is a question, I guess, for me. What
Hmm.
languages do most companies and startups use? I
Yeah.
would say, from what I've seen and companies I've interviewed at, it's either JavaScript, full stack JavaScript. So something like React on the front end, Node or Express. Well, no, Node is the runtime, but yeah,
Hmm.
Express on the back end.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's either that or Rails, which is my preferred stack for web. And then
Right.
from there, it's like databases, yeah, MySQL, uh, Postgres. If it's good, I love Postgres. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
outside of that,
Totally.
then yeah, like Elasticsearch, things like that. But I would say just like as a blanket statement, learn JavaScript just because
Mhm.
you can write it anywhere and you can build mostly anything with it, including mobile apps, desktop apps with like Electron if you want to go down that rabbit hole, React Native, what have you, yeah, right? And
Yeah.
sorry, another tangent. So I mentioned a little earlier that I had a team of developers, right? So there were two developers who had no idea of React before they joined, and
Hmm.
we were able to get them trained up to proficiency with a React and Redux code base.
Hmm.
And this was a CRM system. So at Fort Space, I
Yeah.
built a CRM. So though for them, they had JavaScript experience. So jumping
Hmm.
into React was like very easy.
Hmm.
And React, as many of you know, is like a six-figure job.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, just like learning JavaScript, you have so many options, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
If you're
Totally.
just gonna go do it.
Yeah. I was gonna say like I never used Python personally either. Like I went from Java and which is what was taught in high school to JavaScript when I started
Mm-hmm.
doing web stuff. Um, I think let's do some other questions.
So
Someone
if you're
said they really
learning
want to
Java,
apply.
it should
Nice.
be easy for you to pick up JavaScript. So yeah,
Mm.
it's fine.
Yeah, it
They're
should
all
be
the same
okay.
at the end of the
So
day.
like yeah, like Java's like even like lower level than Java. So like
Mm.
or Java is lower level than
JavaScript,
JavaScript.
yeah,
So they're like pretty different, right?
yeah,
But I think when you like understand certain concepts in Java, like when you go over to JavaScript and you're like, oh, it's actually like much nicer here, right? Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
JVM doesn't like bite me at every small error. Like some things just kind of work, which I think is a good, uh, yeah. If I could ask
yeah.
a
Like
question, before we starting. Yes, Sid, go ahead and ask
yeah,
a question. That's totally okay.
yeah. I was just gonna say to add to that, like my perspective on Java versus JavaScript, or even high versus lower level languages, is that
Hmm.
what do you want to build, right? At the end of the day, you got to
Yeah.
pull back from these tools and think about what job do I want to get? How do I convince an employer, right,
Hmm.
who's going to be looking at my portfolio or my website, whatever, that I have the skills to do this certain job and they should interview me, right? So from that perspective, if building like a, I don't know, Android app with Java is, if that's what's going to get you there, like to be a Java engineer at, I don't know, a consulting company, then go learn Java.
Yeah, totally. So kind of like touching on that, right? Like Sid's question is like, what would be a good language to learn as a client-facing analyst to become a project or product manager? With their current experience being kind of in like SQL and Tableau, I have an answer here, and that's
Go
Python.
ahead. Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
feel like most like data analysis stacks, especially when you're pretty high level, like as a product or project manager, you're not making like hyper in-depth visuals and stuff. Like you don't need anything super low level. Python's going to be great for it. It'll be easy enough to write, especially when you have like less technical coding experience. Like SQL is kind of like coding, but it's not a coding language. And even with Tableau, like yes, you understand like databases, tables, rows, and like the relationships between those, but you're not programming in SQL, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not programming Tableau. I think Python's going to provide the easiest layer of abstraction over those two concepts for you to understand, while still retaining the concepts you already know.
Yeah, I would say just to add to what you're saying,
Mhm.
with Python, visualizing data would be a meaningful way of like leveling up your skills, right? Like having
Mhm.
like a, like a really nice Jupyter notebook.
Yeah,
So
totally.
so yeah, it's just making data more accessible to people, right? Like telling a story. I don't want to sound cliche, but like yeah, telling a story with the data. That's
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where you can add value.
Yeah. Someone said Lowell using Keep, how typical. Yeah, I have an Android phone. I don't have people usually use like the iOS Notes app, and it makes it look better. This like software engineering Q&A thing isn't cut off, but I don't know, man. Oh well, I don't really care. Um, Sweet. Let's see. How much did you learn in boot camp versus a CS major in college? I think we've kind of touched on this before. You learn things from like a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I think you have a much better like product mindset in boot camp versus in CS, you might have like a better theoretical mindset. Um, if you like, again, like if you understand that those are the gaps in each form of education and you work to fill in the opposite gap, then I think you're like a much more well-rounded individual and a much more well-rounded engineer. A lot of people, and I'm going to make a video on this soon, is like a lot of people will be in CS, right? And they're like, oh, I'm learning things the theoretical way, which is the right way of learning things. And then they never try to build like a product or think about anything in that sense. And they like go to work and you're like, what do you mean? Like, there's not just one answer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this answer doesn't exist online somewhere, like on a Quizlet. Um, and then the same thing the other way around. Like, people in boot camp not understanding that like the way they're learning isn't always the way to do things. So when they see someone using Redux, right, maybe like a slightly differently than how they did, they might not understand like why the hell would you do it like this? This is the wrong way to do it. Um, Instead of understanding like why someone's doing something in this way, what benefits it provides them, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's really good that you mentioned that thing with yeah, if someone does something differently in Redux, yeah, I had this exact thing when I was mentoring. There was a student who, so a curried function, right? You pass and call, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you pass the return value of the function that is on the right hand side as the argument to the function that is on the left hand side, that is currying it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, that the student wasn't understanding it when they were using it in a different place in the app. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, try doing this to fix this problem you're having. And
Mm-hmm.
then they were like, oh, what exactly is happening here? And then for me to explain it to them, I had to say, hey, like in Redux, remember that thing, that like boilerplate you have to do to set it up to like map state to props? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening here. And then they're like, oh, I see. So that, I guess, is what bootcamp is in a nutshell. Is like if you focus too much on things like syntax, how things look, um, focus on like, hey, there are squiggles here. Like, why are the squiggles coming up in your editor, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
So things like that. If you just focus a little too much on that and don't focus on learning fundamentals, then you're gonna end up getting trapped in the wrong stuff. So a big part of coding is being able to get yourself unstuck. So
Mm-hmm.
having those like eureka moments and just figuring your way out of problems by just Googling or like asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's what you need to build during boot camp, because once you do that, you can jump into any system. So for example, at Copper, we use Ember, which is a
Mm-hmm.
client-side framework. In fact, the oldest JavaScript client-side framework,
Yeah.
and it's used by LinkedIn. And yeah, it's a very big and complex code base. And going in there, they had no reservations about me not having any Ember experience, because they already knew that I knew the foundation. So I had a JavaScript background. I had, worked with React, Angular. So they're like, yeah, here's Ember. Like we have like a 6-part training series on this, and like a staff engineer will guide you through learning and showing you the scenic routes and the bad neighborhoods in the code base. So
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think like having that flexibility to move languages and stuff is also something that maybe like some bootcamp engineers like don't get, right? They're like, oh, but I learned React in bootcamp. That's what they said would get me the 6-figure job, right? And like, yeah, like maybe some startup is using Vue and not React, right? Like, do you have the flexibility to be able to say, okay, well, this isn't what I learned in the past 3 months, 4 months, whatever, but like I can trust myself to learn it again if I need to.
yeah, and it's also from that perspective of, yeah, they're using Vue, as you mentioned. I learned React.
Mhm.
As a candidate applying for a job, you need to be able to put your experience in context.
Mhm.
So instead of saying something like, oh, React is really similar to Vue, which doesn't make any sense, which most people go to that, right? They like to say, oh, this is spa, this is a spa, that's a spa. Therefore,
Yeah.
they work the same way. But at a technical level, they don't. Like, React's got a virtual DOM. So from there, what they could say instead is like, hey, I've used JavaScript extensively in the past. I've used React, which is a JavaScript framework, and Vue is
Mhm.
pretty much the same thing, but it's sorry, yeah, React is a JavaScript library, Vue is a JavaScript framework, is what I meant to
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
So I just got to learn like the syntactic differences, right? Like
Mhm.
decorators and whatever that Vue uses.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about selling yourself as well. I think a part of it is that, because I've certainly
Mhm.
have had to do that with companies where I'm not familiar with their tech stack, but I'm looking to try to score an offer.
Yeah, totally. I think, okay, so one question, I guess it's more towards me because you didn't go to college for CS.
Mm-hmm.
But so someone asked, like, do you need to go to like Stanford or like UW or Berkeley or an Ivy League CS degree to get into FANG? Definitely not, considering I did not go to any of those schools. I applied to all of them, right? Like, yeah, would it have been amazing if I went to Stanford instead of UC Riverside? Like, yeah, totally. Um, like the opportunities you have present on campus at a university of that level is going to be significantly more. And so when I didn't get into any of those schools, I only got into one school, and it wasn't like a tech school. Um, yeah, like it felt a bit disheartened. Um, but in a little bit, like I mentioned this in another friend's live a couple days ago. The advice that my computer science teacher gave me in high school when he heard about this was that like a well-connected school or a successful school can make any person who attends successful because of the connections that they have. But a driven student, right, can be successful at any school. And so the school that you go to doesn't matter so much. What I understood from that was I'm going to go to the school that's not very well known for CS. I'm going to understand like what opportunities are present on campus, right? How can I get as close to those opportunities as possible and just like execute on those? So for me,
Mm-hmm.
that meant I go to a small school, 2 FANG companies recruit on campus, right? Facebook and Google, the two,
Mm-hmm.
you could say like the 2 big ones, right? Like 2 of the huge ones. But those were, that was it. And that's it. So you have like 2 chances to meet a recruiter per year. And for me, what I did was these recruiters never went through the normal career center. So they always went through the computer science clubs on campus. And so
Okay.
the moment I went to school, I was like, okay, my goal is to be on the board of one of these computer science clubs. Because then the recruiters are going through me, I'm their point of contact. That means that when they come on campus and they first meet the club organizers, that's a group of 8 people. A career fair is a group of 200 people. Much harder to stand out in that crowd than it is to stand out in a crowd of 8. And so, yeah, first year, right? I was on the board by like recruiting season, and I met the recruiters like in person, like before they met anyone else, and handed them my resume first, right? When they were like fresh and not like tired of talking to people, right? Um, and it worked out in my favor, and they actually like remembered me. And next year when I followed up, they were like, "Oh yeah, you're like the president of this club, and or like you're involved in this other org."
Mm-hmm.
So we'd much rather interview you because like they will think that there's a higher chance that you will pass the interviews. Like they're not going to waste their time on people that they kind of think or know are kind of like behind the pack still. That's the story.
Yeah, I I think there's two things there. The first thing is increase the odds in your favor, which most people don't think of doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of small things you could, and we could talk about this for a long time about stuff, optimizing, your set, or optimizing, or even, preparing yourself for success.
Mm-hmm.
So, but on the other side, the fact that they went into the computer science groups or clubs, whatnot, that's interesting because that's where the really passionate people are.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been part of anything like that outside of just
Right.
like, going to hackathons and, doing like what is it? What's the word? Non-organized,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like with the club, I'm gonna assume they're gonna meet at least once a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah, at least once a week, yeah. The other story there was like of another like unconventional thing I've done to like get an offer was I really
hmm
wanted to work for this company called Apollo,
hmm
and they basically make like GraphQL libraries. They're like the de facto standard for GraphQL libraries.
hmm
And to go like join, I was like, okay, well I can apply, which I did, and then I went to their website because I wanted to like build something with them, right? And or like with the libraries they offer. So I went to their website. At some point I end up in like the sitemap, right? Like the footer. And
Okay.
the footer that was like, oh, they have an open source like Slack group where anyone can go in and join. I was like, okay, if I was working at a company and I was running a community Slack group, likely there are going to be some engineers at this company in the Slack. So like, what
hmm
does that mean for me, right? Like I'm going to try to DM one of these engineers and try to get like a referral or like just chat with them, right? And
Yeah.
so I do that. I join the Slack group. I go on the blog or like their engineering blog. Lo and behold, like the top blog post is here's what our interns worked on last summer. And I was looking for an internship. And so I saw the author was an engineering manager and like head of the internship program at Apollo. I go back to the Slack group. I check to see if he's there. He is. And so I DM him and I'm like, hey, just read your article on like what the interns worked at last summer. I think the projects were really cool. I would love to work on something like this over a summer internship. Do you think we can make something like this work out? Um, and then he was like, yeah, sure. Are you free like day after tomorrow for an interview? And I was like, yeah. And then like 2 weeks later, I had an offer in hand. Um,
Nice.
and it was just like so quick from like not having any connections at all and not doing
hmm
the standard like LinkedIn templates, like cold email reach outs. Like it's just
Yeah.
boring at that point for them. Like I get these reach outs on my professional email just because like people find it online or they'll like request me on LinkedIn and stuff. And like if you add a note, like I'll accept it and I'll look at your LinkedIn, right? And if you like really do look impressive, like yeah, I'll chat with you more about this. But like if you were to join like some open source Slack group that I was in, or like some like Twitter discussion or something, right? And in there you were like, hey, I've seen your TikTok, for example, or like I don't know, you just like say something. And
Yeah.
like that is gonna be like stand out so much more to me than like
hmm
a standard LinkedIn reach out of like, I saw you work at Plaid. I think that's cool. I want to work at
Yeah.
Plaid,
The
you know?
worst. Yeah. Um, you mentioned this idea of reaching out to people through organic ways,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of the notion of doing that is you're taught that from the very beginning with bootcamp. The first
Mm-hmm.
thing they say is if you want to get a job at a company, the way you should start from a networking perspective is you start at the top and you work your way down. And they had it down to a method where like you would have a spreadsheet, you would track all the applications, all the companies you want to work at, who the primary contact is, right? So starting from the top of the organization, you work your way down, down to, I guess, engineering managers and whatnot. If you're,
Mm-hmm.
that determined, right? You start from CEO and you go 200 levels down. So,
Right, right.
yeah, I think it's really interesting that they promote that strategy and you just did it, just out of your own accord. And combine that with like a computer science degree, and here you are. So it's a powerful strategy, people. Do it. Go,
Yeah, the
if
organic
you're in high
research thing is
school,
fantastic. Yeah,
if you're in high
organic
school,
research.
get started with like a computer science degree. That's probably the best way to do it, in my opinion. If I had to, actually, this was a topic I emailed you about, was if you had to go back and redo something, for me, that's it. I have no regrets in life besides that, is I wanted to not do business. So yeah, and for me, that change would have had to be implemented back in high school. So yeah,
Yeah,
do more
yeah,
sciences, everybody. If you're not sure what you want to do science. That's what I say.
yeah, yeah. It totally makes sense to me too. Um,
Yeah.
I think I'll answer this question too because I think it's an interesting one. Um,
Mm,
Before I do that, yeah, if anyone like, there's like 40 some people now, so it's a little bit more.
mhm.
But if people want to join, I think I can have 2 guests at a time. So if
Really?
people want
Okay.
to join and like ask questions in person, feel free to do so. I think you need 1,000 followers for it though. Um, but yeah, it'd be cool.
Yeah.
I've never done this before. I think the last time I did a live was when you could only do lives with like, I have my own chat thread and someone else has their own chat thread. And so it's like hard to do Q&As. But now it's like we're both looking at the same thread so we can answer questions together. But
Oh,
yeah, if anyone else
this is
wants
both
to
our
join,
audiences?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really? I didn't know that. So so I can go into a rant about TikTok and some of their kind of restrictive policies, right? Especially with that 1,000. I
Yeah.
think if you had a friend, right?
Mhm.
So my friend Trisha, I wanted to go live with her, and at the time I had 1,000 followers, and I was so hyped. I promoted the event, like we're gonna have like 3 topics of conversation. It was gonna be great, but
Yeah.
she couldn't join because
Oh
in my
man.
mind, like logically, it makes sense that I have a
Mhm.
1,000 followers. Yeah, my guest. It shouldn't matter who it is, right? It could be my
Yeah.
friend. So yeah, I don't know.
Um, Anyways, to answer your question, right? Like what I would have done differently. I
Hmm.
think I'm pretty happy with how I ended up doing things. I would
Okay.
like make some like micro adjustments. I like took some classes in high school that ended up being like not super useful. So we had like a web design course that just taught like HTML and CSS, which I
Okay.
like kind of already knew. And so they were like pretty much just like floater classes. Like I think I could have used 2 courses more effectively. Um,
Hmm.
Other than that, like in college, I wish I would have started the data structure algorithms thing a little bit earlier. That way, maybe I could have gotten the piece of internship the first year. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like even after that, like I'm still happy I didn't like grind leak code or anything. Like I don't know. I actually never had a leak code profile until recently,
Nice.
because I don't know. Like I never really needed to use it. I did like a problem a day on like this other platform where like they just email you a problem.
Okay.
But yeah, like I never understood the obsession of like spending 8 hours a day on it, because like the way I thought of it long term was like it's just not sustainable for me, right? So like I would much rather do a problem a day, a problem every other day, and just stick
Hmm.
to that. And so I
Hmm.
did that for 3 years, right? Like for all of college. And yeah, like a problem a day for 3 years turns into 900 problems. Um, and so yeah, like that sets you up in a fucking amazing spot for
Yeah.
interviewing. Um, but you don't realize that, right? Like some people like focus on completely different things for most of the year, and then for like the month up until their interview, they'll like do leak code. And it's like, okay, well now you have 30 days to match what I've been doing in 300, right? And yeah, I don't know. Like take the sustainable ways has always been my path forward.
Yeah. You have to plan. You got to plan your approach. Fail to plan,
Yeah,
plan to fail. Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
For
yeah. So
sure.
Suck. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Suck, whatever. Something 13.
Hmm.
It mentioned like I do one-on-one chats with my followers. Um,
Okay.
3 times a week now. It used to be 4 times a week. And like anyone can just like sign up for them. The 13, I guess, is like one of the people who I chatted with earlier, and I told them about this like lead code story, and they
Okay.
started like way back in March, and so like they've been doing that since March. And yeah, they're
Nice.
like set up in a way better spot, right? Like March to November is like 8 months. Um, which yeah, if you think
Yeah.
about a problem a day for 8 months is like insane. That's like 200 problems on LeetCode.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're a ninja now. I think
Yeah,
I
I
think
guess
at this
exactly.
point,
Right? Hopefully.
if they have some experience with like systems design, like deploying an application, load balancing or whatever, just basic stuff like that, they could do SDE1 Amazon and have at least a 50% chance of getting in.
Yeah, yeah.
With 8
Yeah, I
months
think
of grinding,
Amazon,
for
out of
sure.
all the companies, is like the most, I don't want to say technical, but I guess I'll say objective. Like if you pass the coding tests, you pass. Facebook has like, I've like kind of seen how they like calibrate interviews, right? And they care a lot
Mhm.
about this like move fast principle. And so they actually prefer if you code a brute force solution very quickly and
Mhm.
then potentially work on an optimal solution rather than
Mhm.
like just like kind of theorate or like just talk about the potential solution, the potential optimal solution the whole time, um,
Mhm.
and then like only get to it in the last 10 minutes. They would much rather you just like code the brute force thing right away. Um, whereas like
Yeah,
with
because it's
Amazon, like
like,
it's like if it works, and you move on.
right. Yeah, I feel like that cuts both ways, right? Like there's a whole like MVP approach. Like, do we want to just make sure, hey, this is, it's like an experiment. Let's see if people like it, get it out
Mm-hmm,
there. But then also at the
mm-hmm,
same time, you want to think of it like a restaurant, right? If someone comes into your restaurant the first time they try your food and they have a bad stomach or they don't like it, whatever, you can't tell them, oh, come back next week. We're going to iterate and it's going to be better, right? So sometimes, with some products, you just got to get it right the first time.
yeah, that makes sense.
Um, Actually, there was a question I saw fly by.
Yeah, go for
It
it.
was, do I work with anyone without a CS degree? So I guess we can answer the opposites. So for me, I've worked at my last company. There were two senior engineers I worked with. One of them had a computer science degree, the other didn't. Um, they were both excellent. They had their like strengths in different areas. So we were like a really solid team, the three of us. So engineering was just the three of us, and then we had QA and so on. At my current job, I actually don't know who's got computer science degrees, but we have an engineering team of about 30 people, 30, maybe 40 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually, so Plaid's actually really cool. We have this like apprenticeship program where we
Mm-hmm.
specifically will hire only from people who come from non-traditional backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So from boot camps or from being self-taught, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like someone who was an apprenticeship engineer and now they're like a full-fledged software engineer on our team. And like, yeah, she's wonderful and like contributes just as equally as like anyone else on the team. And I'm
Nice.
actually really glad to have that. Um, like diversity of perspective on the team as well.
Yeah, and it's amazing that a company has a program like that, especially a startup. Series D, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
Um, no, was it C or what, D or E, you said?
D right now, yeah.
D, okay, okay.
I don't know if we'll get
Yeah,
to E, but
yeah.
no, none of you 26 people heard me say that, so it's okay. Someone asked again, like what boot camp you go to. I think they just joined, so we just not
Okay,
mentioned.
yeah.
They are.
General Assembly, yeah. Oh, they're in Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
so
follow
so
John.
yeah.
He's also in Canada. Yeah, I'm throwing you a bone here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so it was called Bitmaker at the time, but
Mhm.
it's called General Assembly Toronto now. They offer in I don't know, not I guess not in person. They offer remote boot camp. I think they do software engineering and UI UX along with the data and all the rest of it. So yeah, pretty good. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Do you know of any boot camps that are prominent in the US? Because I get this question almost every day. People ask me, "Hey, like, what boot camp do you recommend in the US?"
Yeah,
And
I've
I just
I've
tell them
actually
how to
heard
figure it
of
out.
General Assembly. And my
Hmm.
understanding was that they were actually like a North American like boot camp because I've actually heard of like
Hmm.
General Assembly LA as
Okay,
well.
so
You said they're
okay,
pretty
so
affordable.
yeah,
Huh? They're like a flat thing. I really have a thing against
yeah.
boot camps who are um, what's it called? Who do revenue sharing or like salary sharing? Because it's like
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like the interest rate and stuff on the revenue sharing, like you're just asking for way too much money. Um, and yeah, for the
Hmm.
people who haven't looked, this is not an ad for General Assembly, right? Like I have not
Oh, of
gone to
course.
General Assembly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks like they have like full-time, part-time, and online like options.
Hmm.
There's payment plans. There's a tuition discount for women, which is fantastic. And you can request tuition reimbursement from your employer once you're hired, like outside of the bootcamp, which is fantastic. Yeah. And they're also in San Francisco and like tons of other states.
Yeah, actually, two questions I want to answer there. Affordable boot camps. So I want to give a hot tip on this, and I'm pretty sure if you follow Sensation, you will know this. She went
Mm-hmm.
to a boot camp that actually you didn't have to pay up front for it. So I think this is what you were mentioning with the interest rates, and some people get creative with that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely, research this, look into a boot camp that is doing it. Honestly, figure out the numbers, make sure there are no hidden costs. So
Yeah,
it
totally.
could be good, yeah, if you can go to a boot camp where you only have to pay after you get the job. So then at least you de-risk that initial investment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the other question I wanted to quickly touch on was the how many lines of code one. That one's super
Yeah.
interesting. When I started my career, I was writing about, I don't know, 100, 150 lines of code a day,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even more. But nowadays at my day job, I write, 20, 30 lines of code a day for my business. So I'm the architect here for
Mm-hmm.
my business. I do very little. I review a lot of code. Like right now, there's a PR 90 files deep that I'm
Nice.
reviewing for
Solid.
yeah, for Violet Rails. So yeah, that's how it goes.
That makes sense. I think is I don't mean it in a rude way, right? But like I would disagree
Mhm.
with the question and say like I would never track my lines of code per day.
Oh, of course
Just
not. Yeah,
because
no.
yeah, like some people actually like there's some very toxic managers at Facebook do this, and they basically
Really?
say like, these are the expectations in terms of like lines of code per quarter or per half. This is the expectation of like number of PRs shipped per half, um, and that's like a terrible burden on the ICs or the engineers on the team. Um, but yeah, the Plaid definitely doesn't do that. I actually
Hmm.
spend a significant amount of my time in meetings at
Same.
Facebook and here, but it's actually like a good thing because I'm like starting to make this career transition from like mid-level engineer to senior, which
Okay.
means spending a little bit more time in meetings, like having more ownership over direction, that kind of stuff, interviewing more, right? Um,
Hmm.
yeah, not for other companies. I'm interviewing candidates.
Hmm.
That kind of stuff, or like onboarding new people. They ask questions a lot, so we pair a bunch. Um, that kind of thing. So yeah, in terms of like code per day, like I'm lucky to have a couple like solid focus sessions, like 1 or 2 hours, to start writing code. Um, I think they also ask like bug ratio per 1,000 lines of code. I have no clue,
So
dude. Uh,
let me tell you this. So all the software I've written, none of it has been deprecated yet. So
mm,
I still maintain through Restorone a lot of the legacy software I wrote back in 2018. So
mm-hmm,
what I'm seeing is that past me
mm-hmm,
was big into comments,
mm-hmm,
which made sense as junior developers. We don't really do something like test-driven development.
mm-hmm,
We don't really do that sort of thing in the beginning. But
mm-hmm.
now I do TDD. But back then there was no conception of doing that. In fact, we didn't even have time to write
Yeah, totally.
tests.
Yeah, yeah.
So 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 yeah, back then I wouldn't say that's healthy to write that much code without tests, but now it's like all TDD. In
Mm-hmm,
fact, I would say so. We just shipped a project called Blue Arrow that
mm-hmm,
was 100% covered. The full stack application had 100% test coverage in there. Even for Violet Rails, the open source project we own,
mm-hmm.
that one, even that is like 75%. And yeah, we've had a lot of quick features shipped over the past few months.
Yeah, totally. All right, we
Yeah.
have like a
Hey,
flurry of
Whittington.
your questions come in that I think I'm
Yeah.
gonna go and answer. One is like, how did you go from bootcamp to Fang? I think like maybe I didn't explain this like well
Mm-hmm.
enough. I'm the ex Fang person currently working at Plaid. I did not go to a bootcamp. I went to like a 4-year university in CS. Like I have a traditional background in CS. Don,
Mm-hmm.
who's a friend of mine who's joining today, he's the bootcamp grad and currently works at a startup in Canada. And so yeah, like we wanted to do this live together so that people can have more diverse perspectives in CS versus like me always giving advice. Because a lot of the
Yeah.
times, people that join my Q and A's are also coming from non-technical backgrounds or coming from outside of tech, and I almost feel bad giving advice, right? Because I'm like, I can give advice to the best of my ability, but it's not my lived experience. Like, I don't know if it will work for you, but
Yeah.
I can like, try to guide people, right?
Yeah. Or like tell them how to like figure it out for themselves, right? Like, hey, what are the parameters you got to look at? Like, look at X, Y, Z, and then based on, your circumstances, you should, figure it out for yourself.
Yeah,
But
totally.
I wanted to congratulate someone in the chat.
Yeah,
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 Stripe. And I'm going to take a picture of this. I want to commemorate this. This is great.
yeah. And the person right
Yeah.
after them got Amazon offer as well, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
exactly. Exactly. I wanted to get
It's
both of
so
those at the
cool.
same time. Yeah,
Nice.
that
That's
is cool.
congrats, everyone.
There was a question here. I wanted to quickly.
The QA
Oh,
group, I think that's the
yeah.
next one.
Oh, was that the one? Okay. So let's do that one because I want to get to the one after.
Sure.
Yeah. Why don't you start on the QA one?
Sure. So we do not have a dedicated QA group. We basically like write tests on our own.
Okay.
We do have like a support team that manages a lot of like customer inbound questions. And we have a developer relations team, which manages a lot of the documentation and kind of like sets up the documentation for the support team. So there's kind of like three backstops here. Ideally, support is able to answer someone's question. If not, then it goes to developer relations, who has a little bit more of a technical background, but can also like interface with customers. And then like past that, it would go to my team or developer experience, which is like purely like pretty technically sound. So if it gets to us, it's basically like a bug or a feature request that we might be moving onto the roadmap. That's kind of how
Yeah.
it works here. But yeah, I'm curious to know how it works at your place.
Yeah. So at Copper, we have a dedicated QA team, and they're engineers as well. So they code in Java. They do Selenium integration tests. They also perform manual regression testing. So that's how they do it at Copper. At Restorone, the way we do it is we have no QA. In fact, I'm heavily against doing manual QA. Everything should be automated. So
No,
we rely heavily on first party libraries with Rails, like not first party, but like heavily supported libraries to test a lot of the Rails apps we build. So yeah. A quick question I want to quickly jump to is 22. Are you too old to learn JavaScript? No, I hope that's a joke. Yeah, that's sarcasm, right?
Yeah, not in an aggressive way. We're trying to be encouraging here. Like you should try to learn at any point in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What level do you start interviewing candidates? I've been lucky to have started at a very low level, right? When I was starting out, just 10 months into my career, I was interviewing candidates. Even at Morningstar and Sustainalytics, I was part of interviewing at least 40 or 50 candidates. So yeah, it's what about
I'd
for
say
you?
like
How has that been?
Yeah, I think like a year into your career, typically also when you like start moving into that mid-level role and growing into it, interviewing like is an expectation, if anything, that a company should have for you, because you need to be contributing to the growth of the company, and also it's just like it's kind of like giving back, you know. So yeah, I also started interviewing just about a year in. As of right now, I think I mentioned this earlier, I do about 4 interviews a week, which is pretty time draining, but it's useful. So yeah, like per year, about a couple hundred. And
Wow, nice.
yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. Someone asked like a question specifically to me was when I left Facebook. So I left Facebook when I was in E3 or a new grad engineer. I was expecting a promotion to E4. My manager believed more in tenure than he did in impact. And so to him, he was like, well, it's like a core infra team, which also traditionally like moves slower. And so like, regardless of kind of like the work that I did, he was like, oh, well, you've only been on this team for like a year and like, that's not really enough to move yet. And I was like, okay, thank you. And then I started interviewing like the same day and I left. And yeah, like I made a TikTok about this recently that kind of sort of got pretty popular. So that's that story. At Plaid, I'm a mid-level engineer, and like I mentioned, so E4 growing into E5, hopefully pretty soon.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned the fact that you took that and you just responded by getting a better offer. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, I think just it's funny. We don't have an abundance mindset when it comes to jobs,
Hmm.
right? Actually, I need some water, so give me
Sure,
one
go for
second.
it. Yeah, go for it.
I realize that when I talk for too long,
Yeah,
I lose my
no,
voice.
totally. I was gonna say I had thyroid cancer surgery. I lose my voice after talking too, but
Yeah.
luckily, like it's been getting better. At least, you know, like with my speaking and stuff. My doctor was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a 1% chance that you'll never be able to speak again. And I was like, what the fuck? Like 1%'s tiny, but still, you know, I'm not gonna take that chance. Someone asked what kind of fintech company I work at. I don't work in high frequency trading. I've considered it. I've had recruiters reach out for high frequency trading companies, and I've always declined those interviews straight out because a lot of these companies have pretty poor work life balances. And to me, like that's the number one important thing for me when I join a company. Um, I'm completely unwilling to negotiate on whether or not I can kind of have a life outside of work.
Okay, quick question on
Mm-hmm.
the topic of drinks. Are we
Mm-hmm.
coffee or tea people in here?
Coffee people, for sure.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I gave up coffee cold turkey for about a month,
Mm.
and I don't know. I didn't miss it.
Yeah, it's been all right.
It's been all right.
That's good. You also like, okay, not to be like stereotypical or anything, but you grew up in India?
No,
Is it a Middle Eastern country? And
no.
how much did I pick up?
um, so I grew up in Sri Lanka. So
Okay, okay,
yeah,
okay.
Sri Lankan.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
distinct, but yeah, you know, okay. The area was right. But they drink tea all the time, right? Like they don't really drink coffee there, so kind of makes
I
sense.
didn't drink tea growing up, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pop for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Um, okay, cool. We'll get back to questions, folks. Yeah, we're done talking about coffee and tea.
Okay, yes, let's do that.
Let's see. Okay, so just a couple questions about like PM and like what we think about PMs or like what makes a good PM. To me, what I really like about my current like PM or the PMs we have on our team is they're very good about communicating how my work is impacting other tangential teams' works and roadmaps, and kind of what I have to have done by a certain period of time to make sure I'm not blocking other people. So what they help me do is prioritize my own work, because when I look at a project, right, like I don't necessarily know what the timeline of some other team like far across the company's timeline looks like, and how I can affect that. But my PMs are really good about like pulling all that information together and presenting it in a format where I can schedule my own work to make sure I'm making progress, but that I'm not blocking others.
Yeah. It's for me, I've actually, if you look at my content, you'd think that I've
Mm-hmm.
had toxic managers and I speak from like
Oh
pain,
yeah, because
but
you're
yeah, but
yeah.
I really am not. Like I've had toxic, um, what is it, peers, right? Like I've had toxic,
Mhm.
uh, I don't know, just random people in the company, right, being toxic to me. But I've never had a toxic manager. I've had amazing managers, and one thing that's common to all of them is
Mhm.
that they're not micromanagers. And to
Mhm.
me, that's the most important thing is that I want to feel like I have scope and reach.
Mhm. Mhm.
Once I feel like I'm not, um, and this is something I always say, is like when I feel like I'm not writing code that matters, that's when I just leave.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
yeah. So that's the first thing, just off the top of my head. But outside of that, I've realized that I really like a manager that checks on the emotional health of a team regularly. And that's
Hmm.
not something I got until I started working at Copper.
Yeah.
Is I have weekly meetings with my manager, and they aren't even like most of the time it's not even about the job, right? It's about, hey, how are you feeling? What are you working on? Um, are you feeling like a player? Are you feeling like a pawn, right? So things
Mhm.
like that. But yeah, and I think I hadn't I haven't had that like level of interaction with managers before, because like at my first job, I was working directly with the CEO. So I would
Hmm.
meet Sanjay like once a month.
Hmm.
But with Morningstar, that was like a very, tall, like, publicly traded company. So tall hierarchy. I would meet with the manager once every 3 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, but now here at Copper as a senior software engineer, I get to meet with my manager once a week versus
Hmm.
in the past, it's like once every 3 months. That's like, what do you even talk about, right?
Yeah.
So it's
You.
having those regular checkups I really like.
Mhm. Is Copper like at the scale where you have like PMs? I think like maybe
Yeah,
like you were talking about your manager relationship, which is like great, and like I think the question was
yeah,
specifically
right.
yeah,
Okay,
like
no, sorry,
sure.
yeah, I conflated EM with PM there.
Yeah, that's
So
okay. Those are
yeah,
both like
um,
everything you touched on was good. Definitely having a
yeah,
manager who cares about your emotional well-being at work is like critical. I feel, you know. But yeah, what are your thoughts on PMs and like what makes a good PM?
PMs. The thing with I haven't had much FaceTime with PMs, because for me in the beginning of my career I was the PM, right? I was
Mm,
setting all the doing all the product work, but even now, like with Restorone, I'm the PM. So um, I don't know. I feel like I can't answer that question.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's okay. That's okay. That's why we have like two people here, right? Is like you
yeah,
can have
yeah.
two perspectives on things.
Hmm.
Sweet, cool. So let's see. After that, someone asked, how much like debugging versus development do you do as like the engineer or as an engineer?
So the way it works at Copper is we have we have about 5 or 6 levels, and
Hmm.
when you're senior or above, you are
Hmm.
expected to work on something called top bugs.
Hmm.
So this could be either long running bugs, elusive bugs, bugs that affect only certain customers. So we have a heavily sharded database. So we have some, weirdness around that. So things like that. And from that perspective, a
Hmm.
lot of the work is actually fixing bugs, I would say,
Hmm. Yeah.
at the senior or above level.
Hmm. Yeah. I think,
Also, excuse me, everybody. I don't know why
yeah.
I'm losing my voice.
That's okay, dude. Sorry to keep you on for so long, but I think this has been
No,
super
I'm having a
productive so
great
far.
time.
Yeah, good,
It's
good.
it's
Uh,
it's like my throat gets dry, and then
mhm.
that makes me cough.
Oh, for
How
sure.
does it how does it like sort of work for you?
Well, for me, I've literally had like neck surgery. So like there's scar
Okay.
tissue on my windpipe. And so like that
Oh wow.
stretches
Okay.
and that hurts. Um,
Yeah.
but it's been getting better. There's like stretching, like physical therapy and stuff that you do for it. Yeah, it's fine now. Um,
Yeah.
and I haven't talked much today, so you know I'm using up all of my my talking stamina. Uh, let's see. Okay. One person asked, okay, so do you feel like there's more career growth in product management or software? I think in product management, like maybe I'm not the most well versed in like what the career pathway looks like, but there's an
Me neither.
APM, so there's an associate
Okay.
product manager, there's a
Hmm.
product manager, there's a senior product manager, and then past that, I think you end up becoming like you kind of go down like the VP or the director route um, if you want to. But
Hmm.
I think senior product manager is like that terminal level where a lot of people, the majority of PMs will end up at senior PM and kind of just like stick around there until they're done working. Um, Nothing wrong with that. APMs work on feature level stuff. So like a single project at a time. PMs work on team level projects and organize that way. And senior PMs will work on initiatives that are cross team, cross company, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think that covers it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe against maybe against you can talk about like with like engineering, right? Like I feel like there's a much higher terminal level for engineers where senior engineer for a
Of
lot of people
course.
can happen within 3 years, right? It's like very rare in software engineering or in any career to be considered a quote unquote senior at what you do within such a short period of time. Um, but
Yeah. And yeah, the thing with my experience is that it's not atypical, right?
mhm,
Like it's very hard, or at least it's not very likely that right out of boot camp or even computer science, right, you would get picked up by a venture capitalist and then you'd be able to work on 2 or 3 businesses over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, I had the chance to get my hands dirty early on,
Mm-hmm.
and those lessons are what groomed me to get into, like, get hired by Morningstar and then Copper. So
Yeah.
from there, just if you were to take the essence of that, is just to keep building stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it just comes down to. And I wanted to do a video on how easy it is to get started with open source development,
Mm-hmm.
because
Totally.
one of the developers who work for Restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
they just released a PR for a feature, and this
Mm-hmm.
is a 90 file PR I was talking about.
Right.
Excuse me. Yeah, so based on his experience, like, I was documenting it as we were going through, like, the planning phase and the speccing phase, and
Mm-hmm.
just like working on the database, and some of the emails we've gone through, the thread on GitHub and things like that. And I realized that, hey, working on projects is really easy. Like, of
Mm-hmm.
course, this is his job, like,
Sure.
working on open source software.
Mm-hmm.
But just like the fact that, yeah, he's self-taught as well. So there are a lot of opportunity out. Oh, yeah, I think I'm back now.
Oh, yeah, you're back. You're back. You're good.
Yeah. Yeah, so he does have a day job. His name's Pralish. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's from Nepal. He's got a day job, and yeah, he's a software engineer during the day, and also at night with Restaurant. So
Yeah, totally.
I get to dabble in open source, which honestly for the
Yeah,
past
which is awesome.
8 months,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all I've been doing on outside of my day job.
Mm-hmm. I have someone just told me a very interesting fact there in the chat, which is I do these one-on-one chats, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
like with followers, and they can just like anyone can book it, and it's like a 15-minute chat.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but I just realized I'm booked until the new year, and I'm just like,
Nice.
it's a great experience, right? To like talk to followers and stuff, and like it's actually one-on-one. I don't charge for this shit because like I don't care about making money off of all of you. Like, cool, like I don't know, people do, right?
Yeah.
And like I
Of
don't know.
course. Yeah.
It's just like this is fun for me, and like it's what I do as a hobby, not as a secondary income or anything like that. I make enough money being a
Yeah.
software engineer. Um,
That's exactly my perspective too. Like, I've had a bunch of, and again, this is like at 3,000, or actually I got these partnership offers at like 1,500 followers,
mhm.
and I just had to ghost them, and in good faith, because I don't know, it's just like I don't see that. Like, I don't see myself talking about your Chrome extension
Yeah,
to my audience, right? Like, I
yeah,
definitely see myself talking about like things I enjoy,
mhm.
because I do that sort of content too outside of career and computer science
Yeah.
and
The
getting
watch check, the
jobs.
wrist checks,
The wrist
right?
checks. Actually, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, no, we will. I'm gonna get through
Yeah,
these questions, and
sure.
then I
Yeah,
want to hear about your watches and stuff. Um,
yeah.
cool. So, okay, so someone asked, let's see, what do you recommend to young people deciding between data science and comp sci, and like the differences between those two careers, maybe? Um, I would say actually that there's a video on my page about this. I would highly recommend you go watch it. It's only like a minute. But I think understanding the difference in like what these two career paths do, right? The TLDR of my video was that a data scientist will inform business decisions or technical decisions based on customer behavior, for example, whereas a software engineer is actually going to be doing the implementation of the decisions that the data scientist team makes. You might also be using a data scientist on your team or tangential to your team to be kind of validating the stuff that you've decided to work on. Like if you decide we want to build this like whole like work stream of work for partners on our platform, right? Then you might ask a data scientist like, hey, can you actually look at the user behavior of people who might use this new feature? Will it actually be useful to them? How useful will it be to them? How much quicker will it be? Or even after the fact, how much quicker was it? that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm not qualified to answer that because the most data sciencey thing I've done is do like computer vision and like general object classification. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I've done I've barely dabbled in data science, and that was just like for fun in
Okay.
college. Because some of my
Okay.
friends were like really into the machine learning wave, right? And I was like, okay, the way I see it is like there's a lot of fields in CS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every software engineer should aim to be kind of like T-shaped in their skill structure, which basically means like have some knowledge about everything, but pick one spike that's like your core skill and lean like super fucking heavy into it. Um, and yeah, like that's like kind of what I recommend to people. And so when a lot of my friends decided machine learning was their spike, I wanted to at least be able to talk about it knowledgeably with them. And so I looked up like how do you do machine learning? Like what does data science look like? Like how do you start pulling in all of this like information that doesn't seem like it's that related, and make decisions off of it, like get like glean insights. And yeah, Tony, definitely ask questions. That it's like the whole point of this live. We'd love to answer questions. Um, yeah. Someone asked, do you need physics or software engineering? In college, yes. It's a required course. So like, I'm not saying maybe you like need it on the job. Depends on the role. If you're doing like game engine development, you're going to use a lot more physics than someone who does like web development, right? Understand the field of CS that you're going into, and based on that, determine how much focus you're actually going to put in the class. I took physics because it was required, but I knew that the kind of CS I wanted to get into wasn't going to be very heavy in physics, so I didn't pay attention that much in class, right? Like I always approach things from a perspective where it's like, I don't need to be the best at all of this. Like figure out what will actually be useful for me and focus on that, and everything else can go out the window as long as I pass or as long as I like do the work, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah. Um, the physics thing, it's interesting. So Whittington always makes fun of software engineers who work on the web. He always
Mm-hmm.
says all we do is center divs.
Yeah.
And
It's hard.
he's
You
right.
do it.
Yeah. He would be right about 20% of the time.
Yeah.
But there is some really there, as you mentioned, yeah, there are a lot of roles there that
Mm-hmm.
require physics, right? Even if you want to do like games or like even building apps like Figma on the web, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd need a lot of geometric and that sort of knowledge. But just to be like a software engineer at Amazon, I don't think you need it. You do need a little bit of understanding of like, I don't know, time and space complexity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That level of math, I would say. I don't know. What's your perspective on that? How deep do you need to go for Fang?
In terms of like math and CS and or like math and physics and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really feel it was necessary at all. Like I've never used those skills personally. Um, there were some E6s on the team. Like I will say, right, like there were some E6s or E7s on like my Facebook team. Like we work relatively low level, right? And they did like math on the whiteboard to like determine how quickly this like pipeline could handle X amount of data. And I just let them do it and was like, I'm not going to worry about this. So yeah, maybe at a certain level, if you're working that low level to the system, then it might be necessary, but definitely not for the vast majority of people. Not necessary.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah.
Maybe a
So
follow-up to
there
your
was a
question. Go ahead.
there was a follow up to that question.
It kind of like it's tangential, so I think it makes sense for us to answer next. But
Okay,
the
let's do
question
it.
was from Ashley, who asked, like, what skills do I need outside of school that you would need to learn to be a software engineer? So, like, if not physics and math and stuff, then what?
Then actually, this is a very interesting question. I want to take a
Mm-hmm.
screenshot of this. Maybe we can talk about this in a TikTok.
Yeah.
And I think I touched on this in that email because
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Hey, what's the earliest indication
Mm-hmm.
of someone having a technical, like a love for technical innovation or
Mhm.
having that curiosity? Like, what are the indicators, say, in like a kid, like, and like looking at us, right? What was it like for you growing up outside of school?
For me, like, okay, so I've always been told like my learning style is abnormal. Just because like I don't study and I didn't study like throughout CS, like I never really did.
Okay.
And so like I think what it boils down to is that when I learn, I always choose to learn from first principles, which basically means when you learn something, like learn how that will extend onto everything else that you will learn after. And you essentially build this like mental web of how everything connects together so that, for example, like when I see a problem that I haven't seen before, right? Like I'm not trying to memorize what we studied in lecture the other day. I'm trying to say like, okay, based off of what I know, can I like build myself to this solution without worrying about like what was the exact definition in the textbook, right? Um, and so for me, like I saw several of my friends in high school and middle school and throughout, like also adopt a similar strategy, right? Where they always ask, like, why does this concept work because of what we learned earlier? So, for example, you might have said, okay, like I learned about derivatives, right? And like, does what I know about a derivative apply to now learning an integral, right? Like, don't learn two separate formulas. Learn that one is the inverse of the other, and you've already cut your learning time in half, right? You only need to learn one of the other. Um, and so, like this idea scales to like other things. Uh, and so, yeah, like to me, it was always the people who like understood why they were learning what they were learning and how it connected to the stuff that they have learned in other areas or before.
Yeah, this making connections, and as you
Hmm.
said, deriving things.
Hmm.
For that, I feel like, and this is probably unrelated, but that's something boot camps are really good at doing over a short period of time. It's telling
Yeah.
you what's relevant and how that relates to how you'll grow your career.
Hmm.
But but for me, the turning point with the technical, uh, the indication of like some kind of like technical curiosity or even excellence for me was I would always play around with electronics. Like I was big into building circuits. Like I would do like, I don't know, radios, little RC cars, like build things like that as a kid. So my learning style is hands-on. And the way you
Hmm.
described your learning style, it was a little too abstract for me to quite
Hmm.
grasp like how you learn. But
Hmm.
maybe I guess that's how, yeah, maybe if you could explain it in a different way, I can maybe understand it a bit better.
Yeah, I think like the idea of just asking questions like why something works, right? Like I think that's the common thread between like what I said and what you said,
Mm-hmm.
where you can look at a circuit, right? You can learn about a circuit, you can learn about how it works, but if you really don't know why it works and you really want to like, if your learning style is hands-on, then that's how you learn the why, right? And someone else might learn the why in a different way. But yeah, like understanding why something works, breaking it down to its most simple building block, rebuilding the concept from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
is something that I think people who are in software engineering do really well.
Yeah.
Cool. Good questions here. Someone's considering an offer at Facebook, which is fantastic. I think if you're early on in your career, great place to go. It's very structured. You'll have like all the mentorship in the world available to you. Um, and I think everyone should have the experience of working at a large company and a small company before they decide like what side of the spectrum they personally fall on. Um, Obviously, they pay out of the ass for it, like you'll make a ton of money. But I think you'll learn like pretty quickly that that's not the be all end all. Like your decision framework will go more from how much I make is number one to like other factors that to me like matter a lot more. Um, which goes into this next question, which
Mm-hmm.
is can we have like balance as a software engineer? And like if they don't want tech to be like their whole life.
Yeah. Okay, let me take this one really quick because I want to plug one of my recent videos. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, go take a look at that.
Yeah.
I talk about actually two things here. I want to interpret balance in two separate ways. First, is if you're not big into coding, right? Like what's the balance there? Like you can, I think you mentioned this earlier on in the live, you said DevRel, right? Developer
Mhm.
relations. So
Mhm.
with that, yeah, you, maybe if you're like a business to business and you offer say like an API for doing something, right?
Right.
Then yeah, you could be a DevRel there, and then you would be essentially evangelizing the product from a technical perspective to potential buyers, right?
Mhm.
And then there, you probably, I don't think a DevRel would be writing code.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have a technical background. They know what an ERD is,
Yeah.
but yeah, they wouldn't be
Makes
like a
sense.
working engineer.
Yeah.
But
I
on the
think
other
also
side of
like,
that,
mhm.
oh, sorry, on the other side of that is like having a work-life balance,
Mhm.
right? And I think for that, you got to establish boundaries early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like it's very easy to fall into that trap of I'm going to start work. I'm going to start work remote. For example, like right now during the pandemic, and like I'm finished with like dinner. I'm not doing anything until I go to bed. Like, yeah, I can like look at a PR. I can read my email, right? But like you have to like really force yourself to like keep your stuff away, like way, way away from that. Um, and just have like extremely clear cut boundaries.
Exactly.
I'm maybe not the best example of this, but I'm on call right now, so like I'm getting paid for this, right? Like there's a reason I'm doing this. But when I'm not on call, yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
5 o'clock for me, like hard cut off. Like I'll like stop
Same.
conversations and be like, hey, dude, I'm gonna head out now. I'm gonna get dinner. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's definitely possible to have tons of people have it. I think TikTok glamorizes this like overwork perception, right? Of like, oh, like you want to do 75 hard, or you want to do like the hustle culture or the grind culture, and they're like that kind of stuff blows up. But for every
Mm-hmm.
person that blows up like that, there's tons of people who have healthy work life boundaries and find satisfaction in their job, get paid like a good amount of money to do so, and have fun with it, and then they have hobbies and stuff outside of work. It's extremely common.
Yeah, and this whole like glamorizing overwork, I've been guilty of doing that. So since the beginning of 2021,
Hmm.
I've been grinding away, grinding myself down
Hmm.
for a long time. And then about 3 or 4 months ago, I just stopped. Um, so for the day job side, obviously nothing changed. But
Hmm.
what changed was on the business side, I started delegating more and
Hmm.
worrying less.
Hmm.
So, well, what do I mean by that? I assume the contractors that work for Restorone, they're going to deliver, they're going to do their best, right?
Hmm.
Under that assumption, I don't, like work myself by worrying or
Hmm.
trying to get ahead of problems. So
Yeah.
by doing that, I felt like even with TikTok, right? Based on research, it says make 3 TikToks a day. I make one. On weekends, I
Mhm.
might do three. But
Yeah.
yeah, you got to take breaks.
Yeah, totally. And when you're working for yourself, like, that's a different thing. Like working on your own
Mm-hmm.
business, like is kind of like an investment, right? Like you invest this now for hopefully less work later on. But even then, you have to
Yeah.
understand, like, okay, if not like work life balance, because that doesn't really like that doesn't work in startup land, right? Like if you're building your own business. But
Mm-hmm.
understanding, like, look, like my mental health is important to me, my physical health is important to me, and at a certain point, if I'm choosing between work and whether or not to like drink a glass of water, right? Like it's super extreme example, but like at that point, like you have like weigh the pros and cons, right? Like do you really want to spend an extra X hours doing work, or do you want to like take care of your body for the long term? There's no use being a millionaire if you're like completely burnt out and like hate everything, right? About how you
Yeah.
got there.
Yeah. And this, I'm glad you mentioned the putting yourself first, right?
Mhm.
A job, and I think a lot of people when they're new, they think this. A job doesn't care, or your manager doesn't care how many meals you skipped to deliver work, right? They just care about the end product. So yeah, don't be skipping meals, not drinking water, right? Losing
Yeah.
sleep over a job, because in 5 years, in 90% of scenarios, you will not even care or remember how your
Hmm.
manager treated you or any of those things, because you would have just moved on. If you're playing your cards right, you would have moved on. I think every 5 years, your salary should probably increase by like and this is probably, I'm going to get quoted on this, but if your salary is under like 500K or like 400K ish, it should be increasing by 50%, 50, 60%, or even
Yeah.
100% every 5 years, right? It should, yeah,
Yeah.
should be 100%.
I think like, okay, so if we talk about like top end tech salaries for a bit, right? Like, it's definitely like, I have personally seen offers for E8s or like principal engineers at FANG companies like go upwards of $1 million per year. And that's like a standard offer for that level of engineer, right? 3 years to get to E5, 4 years to get to E6, another 4 years to get to E7. That's like 12 years or whatever. Yeah, like you start at 21, you go to like 32, right? And yeah, like that's legitimately how much you can make, assuming you maintain like a good career structure. What happens a lot of the time is people end up burning out early on because they're like, I just need to get to E5, right? Sure, okay, great. You got to E5 in 2 years. Now, like, do you have the physical and mental capacity to keep going further? Probably not. You're just going to coast to E5. But yeah, like you can make a ton of money, and not like sacrificing your personal health isn't going to help you get there. Some people ask what Armada asks what we do for a living. We're both software engineers. I work at a fintech. Don works at a startup in Canada. That's like a Copper, which is a CRM company. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I wanna make a quick correction there. Copper is based in San Francisco, but I'm
Okay,
Canadian.
fantastic.
So you're right. But no, the company is based in the U.S. And yeah, it's like, it's interesting for me because so you have a day job that you're focused on. Do you do like besides TikTok, do you have like side projects that you're working on?
Not a single one.
Okay.
No. I chill out. I chill out with my girlfriend. I go climbing. I do other like physical stuff. I went and filmed a video at Cut the other day, which was pretty cool. Which again, Cut like super popular YouTube channel, right? Yeah, it's like super popular YouTube channel. They have like 10 million subscribers. Like I went and filmed a video there yesterday, which is pretty cool. And you know, that's something I would have had the opportunity to do, I think, if I had been too focused on side projects and stuff.
Yeah, the side project thing. I used to have a side project addiction. In 2020, I launched 2 SaaS products. Yeah, that was, one of them has a handful of users. The other one is now an invaluable internal tool we use for monitoring about 20 of the apps we built over the last little while. So yeah, it's interesting, those side projects, right? Like you have a lot of inspiration, energy for about maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's, for me, it's always been finding that spark to keep going. And the longest running side project I've had so far is Violet Rails. And I think the magic there is that it's open source. And people, I don't know, people have started using it. Like I'm seeing it, outside of our own clients. People are reaching out over email, mostly with problems, asking questions, right? Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And that keeps me going. So I don't know. What do you think about side projects?
I'm personally not a fan, right? Like I just have like other stuff that I'd rather do outside of work. But I think, yeah, like it's a good way to maybe like keep your skills up to date and that kind of stuff. Again, like lucky enough to work at a company that like stays on top of modern tech stacks, and like I work with like the quote unquote bleeding edge of what I'm doing. So there's not really, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. And yeah, like I said, like I'm just happy taking the consistent like long-term route. Like, yeah, I personally like I don't see myself being like an engineer for my whole life either. So like, yeah, I'll do this for about 5 to 7 years. I'll have like a pretty big nest egg, I think, like saved up. And like at that point, I'll probably retire. I really want to teach, which is something, would be pretty cool to do. I think like the influence I had when I was in high school, having computer science in my high school. I want to like give that same experience to like other people and like kind of like shape their careers that early on and give them that heads up.
I want to grab this question really quickly. Is another bachelor in computer science worth it after graduation in an unrelated field, or should they go to a boot camp if they are coming from an unrelated field? This is essentially the experience I had. And my perspective at the time was I'm not going to do another 4 years because I was coming out of university. So yeah, didn't want to go back in. That was a non-negotiable for me. But
Mm-hmm.
now I'm thinking, is it worth going back and doing another 4 years? Like now, I'm relatively financially free.
Mm-hmm.
Paying 30,000-40,000 for a degree is, it's not a big deal.
Expensive. Yeah.
So, but now my concern is like I'm a little lazier, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and this is another tangent we could go into, is like as software engineers, we're paid six figures, and a lot of the time we're paid that money to swallow our dreams. So, I feel like if I was struggling a bit more to like advance in my career, maybe then I would be inspired to go back to school. But to answer the question in a long-winded way, I would say no, go to a boot camp. If you think you have the ability to take 3 to 6 months out of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not work, have money saved up, as you mentioned, have a nest egg,
Mm-hmm.
then you might be able to pivot with a pretty good chance of success. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're working a day job, I would recommend, I mean, what I did was, and a lot of people I know, they quit everything and just
Mm-hmm.
jumped straight into boot camp, lived and breathed software for 3 months, and then
Mm-hmm.
from there they started their careers. But
Mm-hmm.
the goal is focus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I think like going to college is like so tough because I've made maybe not the same decision between 4 years of college and a 3-month boot camp, for example, or a 6-month boot camp. But when I graduated, I had the option to like stick on for an extra year and like potentially get my master's, right? And for me, the decision came between like doing a master's for maybe like a slightly higher like salary or total compensation, right? But you're losing out on like that year of earning potential, right? And like I don't really like to me like a master's that I wasn't really into wasn't worth like giving up that year. And I think similarly, like if going to a boot camp with a level of drive, right, that you'll actually land at like a company and actually make money, then like the 3.5 years, for example, of like missed out earning potential you make when you go to CS, like yeah, not really worth it. And yeah, someone's asking like master's degree or boot camp. If the goal is software engineering, then I would say boot camp. But again, it's up to you. Like if you want like that master's level of education, like that's like really what you want to do. You want to get like deep into a specific field of computer science, then I would recommend master's. But otherwise, like if your goal is to be a software engineer and you just want to program products, then boot camp makes more sense.
Yeah, if you want to be like a working engineer building stuff, boot camp is good. But if you want to go into like a theoretical, cutting edge sort of research based field, then yeah, go with the traditional route. Go get a PhD in computer science. Like we need more on the cutting edge, right?
Yeah.
Like as Whittington says, centering divs is that only gets us so far as a as a as a species, as a society. There you go. There is a flood of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is unfortunate. I'm actually gonna cut like hard cut for myself at 7:30.
At 7:30. So what time is that? Is that
that's like sorry, it's in like 2 minutes.
It's in 2 minutes. Okay. So I guess
so I feel these are questions towards you, so you feel free to just like rapid fire through these.
No, you know what? I'm gonna grab some screenshots because I wanna actually address these like without rushing.
Sure.
I mean, we're gonna have the recording, but
yeah.
I'm just doing rapid fire. Yeah, stay cheese, everybody. I just grabbed like 5 or 6
sweet
screenshots. But
nice. I realize I'm in all of these screenshots and I have no idea what I look like.
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
Great,
maybe we can like zoom into your face and drag you out.
Let's not do that. Yeah, let's not do that. But yeah, sweet. I guess like to all 54 of you that stuck around till the end or joined and it's suddenly the end, thank you for joining. As always, like these lives are always super, super fun to do. And I'm glad to have Don on today to provide that different perspective that I usually don't have. And yeah, it was really fun. Do you wanna end with some thoughts, and then we can do a wrist check and leave.
Yeah, actually, my thought is just the wrist check. I want to see that Grand Seiko.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I don't know how well my camera will show it, but
Yeah.
I'll try to flip. See
I
what can
almost bought a Grand Seiko about 4 or 5 days ago,
see. Okay. Oh
and
no, wait.
oh, it's doing the
I
green
gotta
screen.
yeah, I know. I gotta try to turn it off. There we go.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
there
There
we
it
go.
is.
Oh, this is a snowflake. Very nice. Power
No,
reserve.
this is the winter,
This is a
or
winter.
from the Four Seasons collection. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
this doesn't
beautiful.
show it off that much, but you can like kind of see it's like a slightly
Yeah,
different dial pattern.
yeah.
Uh,
Let's
but
see the
yeah,
back of the spring drive. That looks
you know,
brilliant.
unfortunately, it's an automatic, so you can't like see much. Um, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So it's like kind of hidden there.
mm. Oh, this is not.
Yeah.
Oh, this is. It is. Well, this is spring drive, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it is spring drive,
beautiful.
but it's yeah, so spring drives are automatic. They don't. I don't think they make a manual. Um,
Yeah, I
but
think it's
yeah,
auto
I wish
only. Yeah,
we could see more of the back.
but
The
yeah.
Nomos Tangente was actually the watch that got me into watches in the first place. Like I just
Really?
thought it was
Okay.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
From the German manufacturers, my favorite is Lange, but
yeah, yeah.
Nomos
No,
is
it's a
is
little bit
really
out of my
nice too.
price range. I know you have some ballin watches, but that's not me.
No, the thing with me is when I got into watches, I got sucked into like the Rolex, um, uh, what is it,
Ecosystem.
Vortex?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then I I wore Rolex for like 5 6 years, sports,
Hmm.
Datejust, two tone, yeah, and then
Yeah.
now Rolex put a bad taste in my mouth, so now I'm branching out, trying different
What
brands.
they do?
But nowadays, the thing with again, like we can watch nerd out,
Hmm.
but the thing with their strategy right now is they're trying to kill Patek and AP.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
in the minds of the consumers, right? They're trying to say like, okay, Rolex, yeah, we do make 1 million watches a year,
Hmm.
but we're more exclusive, right? Like, oh, there's no stock, right? When you go to like a Rolex dealer, and a lot of
Yeah.
these dealers aren't even corporate, they're family owned, so there's like a
Hmm.
lot of favoritism, and
Hmm.
allocation is done by dealers. So at retail, you actually can't buy any of the watches you want to buy,
Yeah.
and your $8,000 Submariner is now
Hmm.
all of a sudden 20 grand.
Hmm.
And from a collector's perspective, this is putting the wrong kind of attention into watches, right?
Hmm.
Because for me as a collector, I think of watches in terms of history and engineering. That's it.
Yeah.
Like I don't wear a nice watch because I want to show off. Most of the time, my watch is under my cuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I leave it at that. Like if I saw your Grand Seiko, I'll definitely talk to you because I know like you're wearing a Grand Seiko, you're into watches, right? But I wouldn't
Hmm.
necessarily strike up a conversation with some random dude wearing a Rolex at a coffee shop, right?
Because
Because
that just
80%,
tells you have 10 grand to spill.
yeah, like it's not for me. I want to talk to people who are into the passion for
Hmm.
for the right reasons.
Hmm.
And um yeah, that's just sort of my thing. For you, top three watches. I know we're over time, but I wanna see
So
your top three watches.
yeah, so this is actually the only watch I have right now. Watch
Okay.
collecting is like a recent hobby of mine. Um,
Okay.
but for me, it goes between this and then my current like grail watch is
Hmm.
AP makes a Royal Oak.
I love it.
That's a limited
Yeah.
edition of 30. And so they make the
Okay.
Royal Oak Sanskrit with Indian numerals or with Sanskrit numerals.
Oh,
Rose
wow.
gold
Okay.
band and case, green dial, orange characters. It's just
Never
like
seen
it's
that one.
fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have never seen that one, but I am a huge Royal Oak fan. I think my favorite Royal Oak is a 2400 ST. That's a 39
Mhm.
millimeter, just your
Mhm.
regular gray dial steel.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, what else? You're into the Royal Oak? That
Okay,
yeah.
so that one, the Royal Oak, I think FP Journe right now is like a big like I guess like infatuation of mine. I don't know if you like know the brand and stuff, but
No, I do.
um
Yeah,
yeah,
but that's you're into
fantastic
you're
stuff.
into you're into high horology, which
I
I'm.
suppose, but it's like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
an interesting thing about it. I guess the Royal Oak I like just because it like connects to kind of like my my background, right? Like I'm Indian, like it's Sanskrit
Right.
dial, like I've never seen that before. And
Right.
so I know because I was looking for just in general like Arabic numeral dials, right? Because I know like Rolex makes some, for example, and I thought other watch companies might as well. So I like Googled that. Then I saw this Royal Oak that had Sanskrit numerals on it. I was like, holy shit, wait. So yeah, I don't know. I might be getting one next year, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I think there's some convincing I have to do with my girlfriend to see if I can
Okay.
spend that much money on a watch. But
Yeah.
so that
Well,
one,
hey, I'm gonna message you on that.
all right, for
About the
sure.
historical watches. There's a collector
Yeah.
I follow on Instagram, Roni
Mm-hmm.
Madhvani. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure if you follow him as
I
well.
don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so he lives in Africa and he's into high horology as well. He's into Patek,
Mm-hmm.
Cartier, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd really like his style because he's into the same sort of like non-traditional cases. I think
Mm-hmm.
with the Royal Oak, like it's a tonneau case, like it is Gerald Genta, right? Like we have the
Yeah.
three watches.
Mm-hmm. I think you stuck around for a bit. Hey, Vinny, I'm doing well. Thank you. Um, I don't know. I don't particularly think I'm that intelligent. I don't know how to help with that.
But yeah, then thanks for checking in. Nice to see you. No, Don. That's it. You got kicked off. Damn. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. I'm gonna kick it off now. But yeah, thanks so much. Hopefully we'll do another live soon. But bye bye.